Pierre Michaels from the Career Services Center at College of DuPage. We'll be talking about developing your digital brand. For this presentation, I am also using live auto captioning. Hopefully it's coming across on your end. I do always want to point out that it's live auto captioning, so there may be some errors in how it presents what I'm saying, but for the most part, it should be accurate in what it's providing. So we're going to be talking about developing your digital brand. And as we go through this process, we're going to be slowly building up to this idea of the digital brand, because we need a foundation of what we are focusing in on as we go through that branding process. So the first thing that we're going to do as we go through here is discuss this idea of branding and what that means for you. There we go. So identifying your professional brand will be this first piece, or first talking about a brand and really defining that from a perspective of just a business side, but also what can you be thinking about as you're moving forward and to help identify your professional brand. Then we'll start talking about this digital world. And then I'll start sharing some ideas based off of different industries, what you may want to be doing. So this is going to be a very general conversation as we move forward, and knowing that there may be some differences as you are in your own area. So for this first part, if you're comfortable, I want to actually hear from you. So just raise your hand through Zoom and you'll go ahead and be able to share, or just enter in the chat what comes to your mind when you see this image. So I'll just give you a little time here to either enter something in the chat or raise your hand and share. What does this image mean to you?
All right, Mary, we have unmuted you if you'd like to chat. And we also have two people who've said coffee in the chat.
Okay. So coffee. Is there something else?
Mermaid.
A mermaid, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it comes from. This is Starbucks. They didn't hear that yet, but people associated the mermaid with Starbucks, and coffee definitely with Starbucks. So let's go ahead and do the same thing for a new image. What do you think of when you see this?
Again, hot coffee.
Coffee. Now, is the coffee of Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts the same?
Well, we also have someone who mentioned donuts, which is what I was thinking too.
Yeah. Dunkin', they've actually started changing their name. It used to be Dunkin' Donuts. They're just transitioning to Dunkin' now. Yeah. But the donuts has always been part of their brand, what they've represented. But if we think of donuts with Dunkin', are we thinking of donuts with Starbucks? I don't even think they serve donuts. I know they have all their other pastries, but I don't think donuts is part of that. No. So as we just kind of start off here in this conversation, we heard it from you guys that coffee is something that's associated with both of these. But this idea of coffee representing both of these doesn't mean that these two are the same. They have their own unique image and their own unique pieces beyond that. No one goes around saying, oh, I went to Dunkin' and confusing it with Starbucks, right? Or vice versa. They are very different in how they present themselves, not just in their logo, but in the setting and the atmosphere that they provide. Dunkin' is about going in and out very quickly. Starbucks is more about the environment, going there and enjoying the setting and getting your work done. So knowing that they may represent similar things, but they are very different in what their brand is and what they're projecting out there to the public. So that's what we need to start thinking about, is how do you differentiate yourself as you go out and promote your brand? And this is basically done through not what you're saying, but it's how you're describing yourself. It's how you're communicating your brand. Sticking with the coffee theme, the world's best coffee. A lot of places will say that they'll advertise they have the world's best coffee. It doesn't really appeal to anyone because they know it's just a generic statement. But then if you go into the details and really communicate your brand, fully bodied coffee that will delight the palate of the serious coffee drinker with a strong hint of smokiness evident in the aroma. And I'm just going to throw this out there. I don't know what that means. I'm not a coffee drinker. I've only had coffee twice in my life. I can't stand it, but I know a lot of people enjoy it. A lot of people really get into the flavors and the different pieces of that. So wanting to know that there's these detailed ways to be describing not just coffee, but describing yourself is what's going to help you establish your brand as you move forward. So instead of just saying that you provide customer service, be detailed in what you're communicating to these projected employers, to the people you're networking with. So instead of saying provide customer service, resolve customer concerns by listening to needs and identifying discrepancies in accounts. Here, we're communicating the same thing, but we're communicating it through details that shows our actions, our involvement, our skill sets, and the results of what we're doing. So I want you to be thinking about this. We're not going to be going into this piece too deep anymore, but just kind of establishing that idea that as you move forward with your brand, you need to be setting yourself apart. And in the traditional way, I guess we could call it the analog way. If we're talking about the digital way as we move forward, the more traditional analog way would be through those documents, through what we've have done for a long time through the job search process. We've communicated about ourselves on the application, through elevator pitches when we're networking, on our resumes, our cover letters throughout the interview. So these are more of those direct connections, the more traditional ways of how we would be going through a job search. So this is where your brand lives. This is where you start projecting your brand. But in this day and age, and COVID times has really accelerated the need for this. How are you presenting yourself in a digital way? How are you presenting yourself in a way that will connect with people on the online platform? And as you go through this, you want to remember your professional brand is what you make of it. If you want to be known for something, then you need to be promoting yourself for that. Remember that your work history is just your work history. It isn't necessarily your brand. Your brand is how you communicate your work history, knowing that as you go through the job search process, you are selling yourself and you are not selling your history. You're selling how your history has prepared you for this next step. So these are all things that you will need to be thinking about as you start establishing your brand and start identifying what you want to be communicating as you move forward. So think about your skill sets. Think about those transferable skills that you have, not just the job specific tasks. And those can be really valuable if you're staying within the same industry. But if you're looking to do a career transition, a career change, think about what other skill sets have you demonstrated. Employers really value soft skills. I come from College of DuPage, so I work with a lot of students that don't have the advanced employment training, but they still have these skill sets. And looking into uh, these reports, these research pieces from employers, they value these soft skills greatly. You know, they want to know that the people they're bringing on will be able to demonstrate and be able to perform well on the job. And employers across the board have been surveyed, they have been evaluated, asking what core skill sets are you looking for? And this really focuses in on new hires and people without extensive training within the field. But these skill sets are needed for all people at any level of their job. So being able to be aware of your career path, how you fit into the big picture, something employers really value. in addition to these more traditional, what we have called soft skills in the past, that I would really emphasize the idea of the transferable skills, your ability to communicate, your critical thinking, being diverse and being able to engage with people from multicultural backgrounds, being able to demonstrate leadership. When employers say they want a leader, they're not necessarily saying they want someone with management experience. What they're saying is they want someone that can engage with a team and lead a team, be a role model. Professionalism, that work ethic is extremely important to all employers, along with teamwork. And this idea of technology agile, being able to take technology from one area and adjust and be able to leverage it in a new setting. And I always want to emphasize these points because it doesn't matter if you are going from a very similar job to something in that same path, or if you're making a big transition. These are skill sets that you have demonstrated. These are skill sets that you have been working on and applying ever since you were young. And it's really up to you as you promote your brand and promote yourself through the job search to be communicating these skills as they're valued by employers. So as you go through this branding process, you want to reflect on the value and contributions you want to be making professionally. You want to be highlighting your skills and abilities. You want to be focusing in on your education and experience. You want to keep in mind who your audience is, who you are promoting your brand towards. Not every company appeals to every uh, potential customer because they're targeting their specific audience. You have to keep your audience in mind as you go through and promote your brand. And you want to make sure that that message that you're sharing is consistent across all platforms. When we talk about that analog method, the resumes, the cover letters, wanting those consistency on your document so that employer could easily see that they belong together. The same is true here when we get into the digital platform. When you're moving into that digital setting, you want to be paying attention to, are you consistently presenting your image? Are you consistently using the same style of font when that is optional? When you are presenting a headshot or pictures, are you being consistent in that image? The different colors, the language that you're using. Using this consistency is showing your attention to detail, but it's also something that marketers are constantly doing as they're creating their own brand. They're making sure everything is in alignment. And that's what you need to be thinking about, not just in these analog pieces, but as you transition into the digital platform. So I know I ran through a lot of information kind of quickly here just to establish this idea of a brand and the more traditional methods that we have been using it. I just want to take a moment to pause and see if any questions have come through or if anyone has questions at this time.
Not yet. So far in the chat, we were just kind of talking about how someone looked at Dunkin' Donuts and actually they don't like coffee like you, so they thought of donuts and never thought of coffee. So kind of just depending on your personal perspective depends on how you think of a brand.
Mhm. Yeah, and being able to be cross-branded, I guess, as Dunkin' Donuts is, even though they may be trying to move away from that. I don't think a lot of people think of Starbucks and think of their pastries or the other things that they have, which is actually a large part of what they have or what's visible when you step in there. But they've really branded themselves in a different way. So being able to cross brand yourself can be really valuable as you move forward.
And then we've got someone with a hand raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself and chat.
I was wondering, do you need to have to be on different platforms like or Instagram, Facebook, and everything, or just one or two will do?
So it's going to depend on your industry. Providing yourself more exposure is valuable, and we'll be getting this more so in the future. For everyone that's attending, if you want to go ahead and kind of type in your industry or your targeted fields into the chat, and then later on, I'll ask for what has been entered, and maybe I could try to get into those specific areas as we get to that point.
All right, I
Thank
think
you.
that's all of our questions for right now, and I'll keep an eye on the chat for those industries for later when you need them.
All right, thank you. So now let's talk about the digital side of things. We talked about the foundation of the brand. Now let's talk digitally. And the importance of this digital access is it gives you 24/7 accessibility, or people 24/7 accessibility to you. When we think of the resume, the cover letter, all those traditional ways, they're only really valuable to those that can get it in their hand. When we start thinking of these digital platforms, they're you're putting yourself out there. Anyone can come across you at any point. So getting back to that question that we just had, the more visibility you have, it could be really valuable to those that are out there as you promote yourself. But what you really need to be doing is going to depend on industry trends. But what I want you to be thinking about at this early stage is not just your footprint. For a long time, we've talked about the footprint. And this is, how are you presenting yourself out there? What are you putting out online? But there is another piece that we should be thinking about that we sometimes overlook, and this is our shadow. This is what other people are posting about you, where you can't always control what other people are posting about you, but you certainly need to be aware of that. You need to be thinking about what image that is presenting, because when your footprint and your shadow are combined, what you're really having out there online is a digital stamp. This is when someone goes out online, they're looking you up. What do they see? It's not just going to be the footprint, what you choose to be out there. It's also going to be that shadow, what other people are choosing to put out there. And this digital stamp is really your digital brand. This is what people are seeing, because your brand is only what people are seeing and what they're associating with you. You may have a desired brand, but your desired brand doesn't necessarily mean that is your brand. Your brand will be what people are finding about you. Companies, this happens to companies all the time, where they have their desired brand, but then people start associating different things with them. So wanting to be aware of the big picture, not just your footprint, not just what you're sharing, but the shadow can really influence that image. So as you move forward, you want to make sure that you are presenting yourself professionally. And so this can mean that you have a professional account and a personal account on some different platforms. On other platforms, this may not be a factor. LinkedIn is 100% professional, so you don't need to create another one for a personal account. But when we're thinking of these more personal digital platforms, these social media platforms, it's very common for people to have two separate accounts, where one is a lot more of a personal side and another one is their professional image they want to be projecting. That professional image, that account will be opened up. It will have a lot more accessibility, because they want employers to find that. They want employers to be looking at the information posted on that social media site. On that personal account, you will be restricting that, uh, your privacy settings. You will be restricting that information that people are finding, because you want it to be more in line, or because it's going to be personal. It's going to be those conversations that you're having with friends, family. You're not going to want this to be part of that professional brand. So knowing that you have to really pay attention to how you are managing these different platforms to best manage your stamp or your digital brand. And as you're posting messages in either setting, that personal or that professional, because as we talk about trying to manage and restrict your personal accounts, it doesn't mean people aren't going to be able to find it. It just means that it's going to be harder for them to find. So you want to be aware of this message and what you're sending out there in both of them. So these are just some basics to be thinking about as you're uh, promoting yourself in this digital setting. And as we think about building your digital brand, there's really three breakdowns that I want to be covering here. First, we're going to hit on just a little bit of LinkedIn. Next week there, or was it, maybe it was 2 weeks, there's going to be a great LinkedIn webinar here. So come back, get that information on LinkedIn. But I'm just going to cover some of the basics of what to be thinking about with LinkedIn, why it's valuable for your digital brand, why it's a must as you are promoting your digital brand. And then getting into those industry specific trends. So wanting to think about what industry you're in and what would be those expectations for employers in that field, how you're putting yourself out there. And then we'll hit briefly on this idea of additional digital platforms, because that's really how you're going to go beyond being a name in your industry and becoming more of a household and putting yourself out there on a much larger scale. So as we think about LinkedIn, I first want you to think about, it doesn't matter of what stage you're at of your career, there is value in LinkedIn. This study is older. The data here is dated. It's about 10 years old now, but the foundation of what this information represents is still true. If you're an entry level person, you're just entering the field, the purpose you're on LinkedIn is going to be different. A majority of people are saying that they're on LinkedIn because they're searching for a job or they're networking with their coworkers. Those are the primary reason people are on LinkedIn at that time. But then when we start looking at established professionals, top level executives, they're really not searching for jobs. That is, just basically an afterthought. What they're looking to do is work within the industry to also be promoting their business. So it's a lot more from a business driven standpoint that LinkedIn can have its value. But in both instances, you're presenting a brand. If you're going through it from a job searching perspective, you're presenting your brand as someone that can help a company. From a top level executive perspective, you're presenting your brand and the brand of the company to help bring in business. So knowing that on LinkedIn, you can be promoting yourself in a different way based off of what you're looking for. And that can evolve over time. Your brand shouldn't just be this one thing that is consistently the same. You want to have a consistent message, but you want to be evolving as a professional, and your brand should evolve with you over time. Some quick tips as far as utilizing LinkedIn to leverage your digital brand really starts off with building your profile. The two areas I want to focus in on is your headline and your about section. When someone is searching for you on LinkedIn, they're going to see your headline. This is going to be something that just shows up. And this is this little line here. You may be able to make it out on the screen, but right under our student's name here, Justin Sample, we have Career Services Office Assistant, Student Worker at College of DuPage Career Services Center. This person is promoting their brand through this headline. They're showing that they have this experience. They're showing themselves as a student. You want to be thinking about, what are you communicating in this headline in about 6 to 8 words? What are those core things that you want the employer to be thinking about? Then in the about section, you could go much deeper. I'm not talking about the elevator pitch in this presentation. It's not something I'm going to dive deep into, but remember your elevator pitch is what can you convey to motivate someone to engage with you in a deeper conversation. And then that elevator pitch is basically your branding statement. And then you want to be set to adapt that to these different settings that you're networking in. But your headline is basically your elevator pitch summarized in just a few core words. Then your about section of your LinkedIn profile is your elevator pitch expanded on, sharing a little bit more detail in a paragraph or two of information. And then everything else throughout your profile is going to be key pieces to be presenting your brand, but then growing your network, being able to go out there and go through the job search and think about what it is that you want to get connected with, because the way you connect with other people is a representation of your brand. So using that search bar, LinkedIn has many different types of searches within its platform to help you identify different areas. So then you want to join these different groups and connect with these people that are in alignment with your brand, that are a way to supplement this image that you're projecting. And when you get really comfortable with LinkedIn, when you get really comfortable with other social media platforms, making sure that you're posting. To have your profile is just a small part of the value of LinkedIn. It's when you're posting that will be really valuable to the people that you are networking with and promoting your brand. Your brand will be reinforced from how you are communicating this core information that you want people to be associating with you. So I'm going to take another moment to pause. I know I'm just doing a quick overview of LinkedIn, and there's another LinkedIn webinar coming up in the series shortly. But if there's any questions on LinkedIn as it associates to leveraging the platform for your brand, I just want to take a moment to open it up for some questions here.
When you're talking about that consistency of your brand, would you be using the same image across all the platforms, or would you be using a different one for each one?
Yeah, you definitely want to be using a professional image, and I think you should be using the same one. Right? You want people to quickly identify this platform belongs to the same person. So if it's your profile image, if it's the banner image here on LinkedIn, making sure that's represented on your other social media platforms you're using so they can quickly connect and associate with you. As we think of the analog method of job searching with your resume and your cover letter, I would always recommend that your header, your name, and your contact information is the same on both documents, because you want to be showing the employer that these documents belong together, right? Using a letter header, just like a company would use a letter header. The same thing is true here in the digital setting. You want to be connecting these little pieces, that image of yourself on these different platforms, or some kind of image that will be cross-platform. So then they could see, okay, on this profile, it belongs to this person, and then same person on this platform. So it just helps draw things together, creating that connection.
Great, thank you. That looks like all of our questions for now.
So from LinkedIn, we'll transition into these industry specific trends. I guess, did we get people entering information into the chat as far as what industries they're interested in?
You did. Someone said they're a mystery writer looking for an agent.
Okay. So I don't have a slide prepared for that, but we could talk about that a little bit. And that was the only one we had come through the chat.
So far, yes.
Okay. So as we think of going through the industry specific trends, it really goes down to research and being aware of how these industry trends are, or what are those common trends within these industries. So then you could be identifying yourself based off of how employers are looking for. And as we get through these examples that I have here, we will see that there's going to be some similarities, but there's also going to be some differences based off of that industry. So as we think about this idea of a mystery writer, or just the writing field in general, is how we'll approach this. You need to start thinking about what are different ways writers promote their brand. How are they going out and representing their writing abilities to other people. And so identifying these trends in the industry and then researching them, so then you can start identifying how employers are then connecting with that brand and being able to establish those connections. So as I said, I don't have a slide prepared for these the writing field, but I would say you need to be creating your beyond your LinkedIn profile where you will be promoting yourself within your LinkedIn profile. Make sure you are uploading some different samples of your writing abilities, your writing samples from your past experiences, as that's a piece that is naturally built into LinkedIn. But then you're probably also going to want to have on a WordPress or some other blogging site where you can be posting more of that information, posting more examples, and basically building a portfolio of your writing. So those would be the key pieces. And then there's a lot of other specific digital platforms out there that you could be looking into that will really represent how you're writing and how those trends fit in. And we'll get into that piece a little bit later.
We
But
did get
looking,
another,
Mhm.
we got another, he expanded and we additionally got another profession, if that's helpful for you.
Sure, let's hear it.
So we did expand and said, talking about the writing, the industry requires a structured approach that generally includes a letter of inquiry that outlines the work and what the potential audience would be, and a little bit about myself. At the same time, the industry is now transitioning to see how I've used the digital environment to build a reader base or creating a brand for me as a writer.
And that is basically what we're talking about, right? How are you creating your brand? So being able to understand the steps that you're taking that we're going through here and how that has appeal, not just from your own networking standpoint, but from your customer relation standpoint, so to speak, your reader's relationship standpoint. People will read a book just because it's from an author that they like. So being able to establish that brand and to show that knowledge base through those letters. And I'll be honest, I don't work much with professional writers. So that would be something I would have to be diving deeper into to tell you specifics. But it based off of that research that you've already done, think about how are you communicating those specific areas through your online presence.
And then your additional career suggestion was changing job from sales to marketing.
And when we think of anytime you're doing a career change, I want to go back to those core skill sets that we were talking about earlier on, as the communication, the teamwork, collaboration, the critical thinking, the diversity and inclusion or equity and inclusion, the professionalism, being able to pull from your sales experience into the marketing experience that you're pursuing so you can highlight those transferable aspects will be a very important part as it relates to going through that branding. But sales and marketing a lot of times are one and the same. They're just different parts of marketing. Sales is a lot more on that customer relation side. And then depending on how you're defining marketing as that opportunity can be a lot more on just the business management side. But again, there's a lot of those natural overlaps. So that's what you want to be paying attention to as you start establishing what your brand is. And then as we start getting into the digital branding, I guess it will depend a little bit on the industries that you're targeting for the marketing. But when we start thinking of marketing yourself to marketers, again, that image across multiple platforms will be really valuable, especially depending on the specific branches within marketing that are of interest. So I'll run through a few different examples here, and then maybe we could revisit some of these ideas or fields that have been thrown out there. And based off of these examples, maybe we could get some more specific ideas from our audience as far as what they're looking for and ways to be approaching it. So first, as an example, I want to talk about a graphic designer. A graphic designer, if you're going down this path, you need to have your own website and you need to have a digital portfolio through that website. And on this portfolio website, you want to be categorizing your work. To just present your work isn't enough. You really need to be showing that you can do your work in different areas, that you're not just on this one path, but you can be designing areas or designing pieces into different categories. And then you need to include write-ups on these projects. You need to be including background context onto these projects that you were working on. And then also, almost as a given on your website, you want to make sure you have your contact information. How can they get a hold of you? So that is a basic industry trend, but also making sure that you're on the very visual social media. Some social medias are more information and text heavy. Twitter falls into that category, but then there's others that are a lot more image driven, Instagram as an example. So wanting to be on these visual social medias to be promoting and putting your work out there. And as you go through the job search process, you want to be having two different types of brand or two different types of resumes to represent your brand. And this is really important as we think about how employers read resumes and they're using an ATS, an application tracking software, to go through the resume review process, which could be a whole conversation in itself. But you need to have one resume that will be ATS friendly. And then you need to have another resume that will be very visual driven and representing your graphic design abilities. And as you put that out there in the digital setting or even just applying through a company's website, you need to make sure both are accessible. You want to make sure that that ATS friendly resume is there so the employer could be pulling from it, but you want this digital one representing your work to also be alongside it so they could quickly see your design put into play. For the cosmetology field, when we think of cosmetology, it's very visual. So there's some overlap here to the graphic design field. But here, instead of the website being the priority, social media and your portfolio on different social media will be more of a driving force because it's a lot more of an informal field. But then having your own website as a portfolio will help you stand out, where you include your resume. But here, because cosmetology, and this is partially true for graphic design as well, but it's a lot of customer relations. When you're working in cosmetology, you're standing behind a chair, you're working with someone constantly. And it's really about that relationship building that brings people back. So you want to be including those recommendations through this digital portfolio, through your website, to be representing yourself. So incorporating these quotes and other things that people have mentioned about you to help you establish your brand. That field is a completely word of mouth for the most part. So you want to be incorporating that in how you communicate yourself online. Also, cosmetology, the before and after are big selling pieces, but also think about along the way. What were you doing through that process to go from this beginning to this new end? So again, a lot of overlaps as it relates to the graphic design field, but just some very specific differences because of how the field operates. If you're thinking about the computer science field, GitHub profile is a must. I talked about LinkedIn being a must kind of as a general blanket. Here in the computer science field, you need to have a GitHub profile. This is where you're going to be able to establish yourself. In addition, have your own website, something that you've created. Have it include examples of different projects. Make sure that you're including those write-ups, those descriptions of it, but also demonstrating your skill sets and making sure that this is going to be a mobile friendly platform and a desktop friendly platform. Some other digital portfolios could get away with it not being accessible on both mediums, but as a computer science field, you're going to need to show that adaptability and that ability to work through these different platforms, because that is a core essential piece of the field. So as you build your profile, make sure that you have those different representations. Just as a general business field, so we talked about some fields that are producing these specific projects and those profiles. Well, in a general business, so going towards a marketing field, just as, or an accounting field, just as, you know, a general area, the LinkedIn profile, as I said earlier, is a must, but you're going to be active on this platform a lot more than these other examples that I was going through. You need to make sure that your profile is completed. LinkedIn makes this easy because they just have the add profile section, and read through that. Anytime you see something that slightly relates to your background, make sure you're representing information. You're inputting as much as you can there. And as I mentioned earlier, through LinkedIn, you're joining different groups. You're identifying these targeted networks that you want to be getting connected with, that you want to be associated with, and you want to be sharing that information that will help promote your brand. So using the LinkedIn to not just learn, but also to be putting yourself out there. Twitter, this is, you know, growing. It will help you stay up to date on what is out there, but again, it's about sharing that content. And then as we think about trying to go a little bit beyond the basics, creating a blog, a website, a podcast, these are different ways to help establish yourself as you set yourself apart against those that will also be applying to those fields. So going through these examples, I just wanted to bring it back to those questions that we had earlier, and see if there's anything in the chat or other ideas people have had based off of these examples that they want to be diving deeper into.
I don't have anything at the moment.
Okay. So this last piece I'm going to be hitting on here, this is a lot broader of a topic here. This is just going beyond those examples that we were talking about, going beyond the basics. So you want to be doing your research, identifying what is out there, but then you want to be putting yourself beyond the basics. You want to be marketing yourself as much as you can. And there's not much I could say about this other than you have to go out there, you have to find these platforms that make sense for you and utilize them. There is an article out there, 75 plus social media sites you need to know in 2020. I know we're in 2021 right now. Things haven't really changed that much. There's always new areas out there, but I will be providing a copy of these slides, and the link to that article will also be out there. What you want to be thinking about is there's really no end, depending on how you want to be putting yourself out there, how much time you want to be committing to your digital brand. Going through this process is a long process. It's not easy to be on all these different platforms. There are sites out there like Hootsuite that will help you manage multiple at one time, that will make sure that you are posting things on a schedule. But you want to also be thinking about not just the management, but what makes the most sense for you. And again, that's not really something that I can answer, at least not in this type of platform. That's only something that you can answer through your research, or as you sit down with other professionals within the field to help identify what makes sense for your goals for that industry. So that is the basics of building your brand and going through the digital brand process. I just want to end here with any questions that have come through that are lingering based off of anything that I have shared here.
We did have one follow-up question. What if we don't know how to create a website or a podcast? Is that a must-have?
Again, I think that's going to depend on your industry. If you don't know how to create a website, I'm guessing that's not going to be part of your job, part of the industry, the goals that you have. But it could be something that will then help you stand apart if that's not a common trend within that field. And there's a lot of resources out there. I'm sure the Addison Library has resources that can help you building your website. I know College of DuPage has some different classes that you could be taking that would relate to this. So as a general, I'll say it's not going to be important, but it can be something that can help you establish yourself as someone different as you move along.